What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're jumping in with some Destiny 2 news. And so with the update today, we get a first look at some new armor coming in the final shape, as well as general teasers for the expansion and potential story there, so we'll touch on that. Plus Bungie give us hints about the upcoming showcase, and then we get information about a whole bunch of weapon changes. So firstly, and pretty importantly, there are updates to crafting, the crafting economy, and some of the processes involved in upgrading weapons. Some pretty good changes there, but additionally, Bungie have broke down archetype updates, buffs, nerfs, and reworks coming to general weapons, but also a bunch of updates to exotics. And we get a preview of the upcoming Monte Carlo catalyst, and a general view of the weapon sandbox moving into Season 22. So, a few things to round up in the video today, guys. As always, I hope you enjoy this one, and if you do, a rating below really does help us out. But without further delay, let's get into it. And so initially, Bungie posted a teaser for the upcoming showcase for the final shape. Of course, that'll be next Tuesday. And one of the things they show right here is an image, presumably associated with the campaign content for the final shape. And we see Ikora, as well as Sabathun's ghost in Morro, which in itself is a bit of a story teaser right there for the final shape and some of the stuff we may potentially see. But on top of that, we also get a look at new armor. So we can see a warlock right there with this very kind of dark, almost hive-themed armor. There's some pretty cool glow points on there too. And typically when Bungie show off armor for upcoming expansion content, it tends to be the world or core kind of themed armor associated with the expansion. So let us know what you think about that down below. Of course, we're only seeing one class there, but potentially a pretty cool armor set coming up for the final shape. But related to the showcase and the upcoming content reveal, Bungie have said the Vanguard has rallied and legends from every corner of the galaxy leap forward, lending their bravery to the oncoming conflict. Together, we must travel to a place of new wonders and old memories where the Witness continues its unrelenting corruption, promising oblivion should we not fight. Join us as we prepare for the start of an impossible journey. So just a bit of a further teaser right there for the final shape, the kind of story. And of course, as teased, we're going to see the return of Cade 6. And it's likely to be a rather interesting story, hopefully, at least. So let us know what you think about that, and of course, I'll catch you guys next week for the showcase. Up next though, Bungie have outlined a series of weapon changes, economy updates, and exotic tuning for Season 22. And this is stuff that I wasn't able to talk about yesterday when the update dropped, but initially there are some pretty interesting changes coming to weapon crafting, and they talk about weapon progression, and they say while sure Chi-style weapon farming is not ideal, instead of nerfing that type of behavior and taking the option away from players, we've decided to buff the weapon level progression obtained through more meaningful methods, like activity completions and PvP kills. Since the opportunity to get kills in PvP is far lower than what is possible in PvE, we'll be increasing the amount of progression earned by defeating Guardians in PvP activities starting with Season 22. So weapon progression will be boosted across Crucible, Trials of Osiris, Dares of Eternity, Wellspring, Gambit, and Platinum score completions of Legend and Master Lost sectors. But they say they're also adding the capability for progress that exceeds the current level to roll over to the next level, and we'll finally get the ability for crafted weapon XP to roll over in Season 22. As a result of the change, weapon leveling through completing activities should see a large overall increase in efficacy, not just limited to the specific activity types that they're modifying for Season 22. So that's a big positive. But on top of that, they've outlined that they're adding the capacity to directly increase a weapon's level through currency expenditure. So crafted and enhanced weapons will both receive a new mod slot in their weapon details, where you can spend glimmer and enhancement cores to boost the level of a weapon. And this mod will increase the weapon's level directly, leaving your existing progress towards the next level untouched. There'll be no cap for how far you can boost a weapon's level to, but the cost of this boosting will increase relative to the level of the weapon. Weapon usage is meant to be the main path for increasing a weapon's level, however, with restrictions of how many weapons you can level at a time, and the always increasing expansion to the amount of weapons that have a level, we wanted to provide an alternative method for leveling that allows for both jump-starting of a crafted weapon, and also the ability to level a larger amount of weapons stockpiled in your inventory. So there will be a node allowing us to directly level a weapon up. But they say another change we're making is that resonant and harmonic alloys will be deprecated and will no longer be obtained during a dismantle starting in Season 22, and they plan to remove the materials entirely at some point in the future, but they say until then, your remaining materials will be available to be exchanged for glimmer at Raoul in the tower. So some good changes there, and hopefully there'll be less kind of economy materials in general associated with crafting. Let us know your thoughts below, but they also say in Season 22 they'll be making some changes to help acquiring Neomuna weapon patterns. So they say that the Neomuna Weekly Pinnacle Story Mission Score Challenge will provide guaranteed Neomuna weapon pattern progress the first time it's completed each week. But also, the Neomuna Vendor Engram upgrade will increase the drop chance of deep sight weapons, and this is retroactive if you've already claimed the vendor upgrade. And they say the Throne World Vendor Engram will also receive the same behaviour for Throne World deep sight weapons. And in Season 22, there'll be a bug fix for the underlying deep sight drop system that manifested from the major overhaul they did for Lightfall, which can decrease the deep sight drop rate as you're near the completion of a pattern set, which should all result in more Neomuna Red Border weapon drops, so that's positive if folks are still working on fleshing out those collections. So some good changes overall there, and the Tease as well, we're making necessary changes to the system and are in the middle of developing a large crafting related feature targeted for the final shape year. So next year there will be another kind of major feature related to crafting, but they say they'll provide more details about that once they've developed those changes a little more. So a bunch of stuff coming to weapon progress right there, and let us know what you think about it down below. But next they get on to general archetype and weapon tuning coming in Season 22. So initially for hand cannons, as they've previously outlined, in general, they're increasing the reload speed at 0 stat by 15%, and then in PvE, they're increasing damage against minor combatants by 20%, with damage against major combatants being increased by 75%. Plus they outline once again that they've changed the Warden's Law to be the first member of a new subfamily, which is the Heavy Burst, and this fires a 2-round burst. And then for bows, they've got some updates to fix hit registration at longer ranges, and in general, they've reduced the minimum reload animation duration from 0.5 seconds to 0.3, and increased projectile velocity at full draw so that projectiles will continue to perform as if they were hit scan at longer distances at higher frame rates. Then for lightweight bows, they've equalized the full draw projectile velocity with precisions. And so it won't necessarily feel that different to use the bows, but it should improve their performance at longer ranges and at higher frame rates on PC. And then for SMGs, they fixed the RPM stat display to correctly show 720 RPM on aggressive SMGs. And they point out this doesn't change the actual RPM of the weapon. They've always fired at 720, but there was a bug previously which meant that RPM wasn't represented visually in the stats. They also say that aggressive sidearms have been far out of band in terms of time to kill, and they're reducing base damage from 32 to 30. There are some other general quality of life updates to weapons, and so for pulse rifles and the BXR Battler, they're increasing zoom back to 20. Then for shotguns, they fixed a visual bug that caused the impact stat to display incorrectly, and that affected weapons like the Comedian. Then for fusion rifles, they say players noticed that the enhanced intrinsic perks and masterworks felt like they were making fusions worse by reducing their damage per bolt. And they fixed an issue where intrinsic perks were decreasing the damage dealt by fusions when they changed the charge time stat. Plus, they're making waveframe heavy grenade launchers safer, and the size and damage of the self-damage AoE is now reduced, which should make it much safer to fire the projectile closer to your feet. And then there are a few changes related to swords and sword guard. So firstly, energy now recharges after a short delay when used, but recharges faster. And the delay ranges between 2.7 seconds and 1.05 seconds, decreasing the charge rate stat, and so they've massively increased the rate that energy returns after the delay to compensate, and they increase even more at higher charge rate stats, and even after the delay, swords now return to full energy from empty faster than before the rework. On top of that, full power heavy attacks can now be used with any non-zero amount of sword energy, rather than requiring full sword energy, and they massively increase the sword guard damage resistance, giving it between 82.5 and 95% damage reduction, depending on the guard resistance stat. On top of that, Sword Guard no longer loses energy when taking damage, and so they've removed the guarding efficiency stat altogether, and Sword Guard duration is now increased across every sword type, and those with the shortest durations will benefit the most. So that sounds good there, but also they say Sword Guard talent nodes have had their stats squished down, which allows origin traits and other sword perks more room to increase the stats and allow performance beyond their previous maximum. Plus those talent nodes will now visually change the charge rate bar on the inspection screen, and sword movement speed while blocking is increased from a 0.75 multiplier to a 0.85 times multiplier, but they do say that the Lament exotic sword has been special cased so that its charge rate and delay are unaffected, but the benefits from the increased guard damage reduction and duration will still apply. So a few pretty good changes there, kind of a mixture of small tuning updates and quality of life changes. But now getting into exotic stuff, and Bungie previewed the new catalyst coming from Monte Carlo. So they've said it was mechanically the most complex catalyst they've ever done, requiring a host of custom animation work and lots of things they've never done with a weapon previously. But as we can see right here, Monte Carlo will be able to turn into a glaive. Obviously, we'll have to mess around with it in-game to get a full understanding there, but pretty good change, and one of the more interesting kind of catalyst reworks, I suppose. And yes, in general, we got the Monte Carlo catalyst that Bungie teased quite a while back now, which is one of the weapons that players were most anticipating would get that change. For other exotic updates though, they say for Quicksilver Storm, they fixed an issue where ammo was loaded into the weapon slightly too late in the reload animation. And with Deadman's Tale, they fixed the displayed impact stat, which is cosmetic only, and damage per bullet will be unchanged. But they also reworked the Catalyst perk for Two-Tailed Fox, and it now fires a 3-shot burst with the Catalyst, instead of firing 3 rockets in a 2-shot burst. There are more changes for bows here, and for the Vergless Curve, they say Whisper of Fissures detonations now generate hail barrage stacks if the stasis crystal was created by the weapon, but also Shiver Quiver now activates when slowing enemies, and they increase the slow stacks from 40 to 60 when hitting players directly with hail barrage arrows, and this allows for a freeze if 2 hail barrage arrows hit the same player. And then we get details about the Le Monarch nerf, which is aimed at PvP, and they've reduced the draw time from 684 milliseconds to 612, but also reduced body shot damage from 100 to 85, and they increased the critical hit multiplier from 1.5 times to 1.6 times. But there are also changes to the poison damage over time effect, and they've reduced that poison DOT duration from 3 seconds to 1.75 seconds, moved the 8 damage ticks to 6, but poison deals the same total damage to players, and poison damage has been increased in PvE by 50% to compensate. So an interesting change to the Monarch there, but there's also updates to Vex Mythoclast, once again mainly targeted at PvP, but they say RPM has been reduced from 390 to 360 to match other high impact auto rifles. They've also increased damage against minor combatants and mages by 25%. So the RPM change is mainly to kind of rein them in PvP, with that increased damage compensating slightly for PvE. And for Tommy's matchbook, they've updated the Scorch value, and it was previously 14 plus 7 with Ember of Ashes equipped, but now it's 15 plus 5. Here though, we get details about the Touch of Malice, and they say they've increased the final round damage in PvE by 20%, with a decrease to the self-damage from the final round from 10 to 7. They also say that final round damage can no longer kill the user. They've increased the health awarded by Touch of Mercy perk from 30 to 75, and that's been set up to work like Unrelenting, and Guardians and Major combatants give more points towards activation, and they increase the time allowed between kills. Plus, Ball of Darkness now appropriately deals arc damage and will blind combatants and stun unstoppable champions. So pretty interesting change right there to Touch of Malice. Next though, for Malfeasance, I half expected them to nerf it somehow, but they say they fixed an issue where the Vorpal Weapon Catalyst wasn't displaying the status buff text. Then for Cloud Strike, they reduced the lethal kill distance of the Lightning Strike against players, and I believe they previously said that goes from around 5 meters down to 3. Something else positive here though is a Wicked Implement buff, and so they say the timing window for creeping attrition has been increased from 3.5 to 4.5 seconds, but additionally players can now activate Tithing Harvest by destroying stasis crystals, and the Wicked Implement Exotic Catalyst now also includes the Headstone perk. So a small buff right there for Wicked Implement as well, which is positive. And then we get onto some changes for specific weapon perks, and here they say for Bipod, they've reduced the damage penalty from 40% to 25%, so weapons with Bipod will now do a little more damage than before. And for Envious Assassin, they say there is no longer a time limit after kills within which you must activate the perk or get another kill. And they say the perk will now activate even if the magazine is overflowed. And Enhanced Envious Assassin now provides fractionally more ammo per kill instead of a longer window of time after a kill. So that's a good buff there for Envious Assassin. But for Under Over, they say it was a bit too niche for its own good, and it now provides bonus body shot damage against players with Woven Mail. Plus they increased the bonus damage against combatant shields, and it deals significantly increased damage to enemies who are enhanced by Dark Cabal overshields in addition to enemies shielded by Lucent Moths. So some interesting adjustments to that one as well. But for Under Pressure, there's a slight nerf targeted at PvP, and they've reduced the maximum accuracy cone scaler from 0.5 to 0.75. Plus a change for Shoot to Loot, and it no longer triggers the reload when shooting a special brick that could not be picked up, while also having an overflowed weapon equipped. And explosive damage now interacts with Orbs of Power. But very finally, for Valiant Charge, the perk now deactivates after the initial sword swing. Then for Ambush, it no longer deactivates from healing, fall damage, or being shot by allies. And with Explosive Light, they fixed a bug where the enhanced version of the perk was granting 2 stacks on the initial orb pickup. And finally for Chill Clip, they say it was a little too easy to deal with all 3 types of champions at once, so they've reduced the slow stacks from 60 to 40, and Wolfpack rounds will no longer trigger the perk. So a mixed bag of changes there for perks as well, but overall I think a positive weapon update right there, especially some of the exotic buffs. Of course the more groundbreaking updates are things like the Monte Carlo Catalyst, but otherwise lots of quality of life stuff. I think the crafting weapon changes are good as well, and so share your thoughts down in the comment section. For today though guys, that does it for another massive roundup of changes coming in Season 22. As always, I'll keep you posted next week when we go live with the season, new patch changes, and the showcase, so be sure to get tuned in right here on the channel, subscribe and turn on those notifications so I can keep you up to date. But otherwise, as always, I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you guys have an awesome day.